The law loses its meaning the moment power begins deciding who deserves justice. The rain had stopped only minutes before the morning traffic settled around the Jefferson County Courthouse. Thin streams of water still clung to the granite steps while lawyers hurried inside carrying leather briefcases. Witnesses nervously rehearsed their testimony beneath their breath, and courthouse employees greeted one another with practiced smiles. Every person walking through those heavy glass doors believed the building existed for one purpose alone: to give every citizen an equal chance to be heard. But equality often depended on the people entrusted to enforce it. Officer Ethan Walker had worn his badge for nearly 15 years. His record was filled with commendations for discipline, punctuality, and professionalism. Yet among many courthouse employees, another reputation quietly followed him. He trusted assumptions more than explanations. He believed authority was most effective when people feared questioning it. And too often, the color of someone's skin shaped his first judgment before facts ever had the opportunity to speak. Less than an hour earlier, Ethan had arrested a young black woman during what should have been nothing more than a routine traffic stop a few blocks from the courthouse. Her name was Monica Hayes, 32 years old, community volunteer, director of a neighborhood literacy program. She had been driving toward the courthouse to testify as a witness in a civil case involving housing discrimination. Instead of preparing for testimony, she now sat on a wooden bench inside the courthouse holding area with her wrists sore from handcuffs that had only recently been removed. The arrest had begun with a broken taillight. Ethan had activated his patrol lights, approached her vehicle, and asked for her license and registration. Monica complied immediately. She answered every question calmly. When she politely asked why she was being ordered out of her vehicle after already providing her identification, Ethan interpreted the question as resistance instead of clarification. Within minutes, the encounter escalated. He accused her of refusing lawful instructions despite repeated compliance captured by nearby traffic cameras. Now she sat quietly, smoothing the wrinkles from the sleeves of her navy blue blazer while trying to steady her breathing. Across the waiting area, several attorneys noticed her. One whispered to another after recognizing Monica from local community meetings. "Isn't she the housing advocate?" "I think so." Monica heard the conversation but kept her eyes lowered. She had no interest in defending herself through reputation. She trusted that the truth, if anyone cared enough to examine it, would eventually speak louder than accusations. The holding area door opened. Officer Ethan Walker entered carrying a stack of paperwork. His expression remained unchanged. He stopped directly in front of Monica. "You'll be seeing the judge shortly," he said flatly. Monica looked up. "I understand. You should have thought about that before refusing instructions." "Officer," she answered quietly, "I followed every instruction you gave me." Ethan folded his arms. "That's not what my report says." Monica met his eyes without anger. "Reports can be corrected." The simple sentence irritated him far more than shouting ever could. "Careful," he warned. "Your attitude isn't helping." She remained silent. Around them, several courthouse employees exchanged uneasy glances. One deputy looked toward the security cameras mounted above the hallway before quietly returning to his paperwork. Another clerk hesitated as if considering whether to notify a supervisor. No one intervened. Ethan believed the silence confirmed his authority. He didn't realize it was something entirely different. It was discomfort. It was doubt. It was the uneasy feeling that grows whenever people witness power being exercised without fairness. Upstairs, Judge William Harper reviewed the morning docket inside his chambers. A thick case file rested open before him. One arrest report immediately caught his attention. The timeline appeared unusually brief. The narrative seemed incomplete. Small inconsistencies stood out to an experienced eye. He read the officer's statement again, then compared it to the preliminary booking record. The times didn't align. The listed reason for the arrest appeared unusually vague. Judge Harper slowly removed his glasses and pressed a button on the courthouse intercom. "Please have the arresting officer and Ms. Monica Hayes present when this matter is called," he instructed his clerk. and request every available recording associated with the traffic stop." "Yes, Your Honor," the clerk replied. Downstairs, Monica quietly closed her eyes for a brief moment. She wasn't praying for sympathy. She wasn't hoping for revenge. She simply hoped that somewhere inside the courthouse above her, someone still believed that justice began with listening before judging. Neither she nor Officer Ethan Walker realized that before the morning ended, the courtroom would become the place where authority itself would be placed on trial. Justice is often tested long before the first witness is sworn in. Monica Hayes was escorted from the holding area toward courtroom 2 with quiet composure. The metal handcuffs had been removed only moments earlier, yet the faint red marks around her wrists remained. She made no effort to hide them beneath the sleeves of her blazer. She simply walked forward with her portfolio held close against her side, determined that dignity would accompany her where freedom temporarily could not. Officer Ethan Walker followed several steps behind, carrying the arrest report with the confidence of a man who believed the outcome had already been decided. To him, the paperwork represented authority. To Monica, it represented an opportunity for the truth to be examined. As they entered the courtroom, conversations softened. Attorneys glanced toward the defendant's table before returning to their notes. Court reporters adjusted their keyboards. A deputy opened the side gate, directing Monica to take a seat while Ethan remained near the prosecution table. Judge William Harper had not yet entered, but his clerk was already reviewing the morning files. She paused when she noticed Monica's name. "Ms. Hayes?" she asked politely. "Yes. I understand you were expected today as a witness in another civil matter." Monica nodded. "That was my original purpose for coming." The clerk looked down at the arrest report, then back at Monica. Something about the circumstances didn't seem to fit. Before she could ask another question, Ethan interrupted. "The report contains everything the court needs." His tone was firm enough to end the conversation. Monica remained silent. She had learned long ago that truth rarely benefited from competing with pride. Moments later, the bailiff announced, "All rise." Judge Harper entered the courtroom with measured confidence, greeting the room with a brief nod before taking his seat. He reviewed the docket carefully, saying nothing for nearly a minute. Finally, he reached Monica's case. State versus Monica Hayes. His eyes moved slowly across the file before resting on Ethan. "Officer Walker, you were the arresting officer?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well." The judge continued reading. His expression gradually changed. He turned another page, then another. Finally, he looked toward the clerk. "Have the requested recordings arrived?" "Traffic camera footage has been delivered, Your Honor. Additional body camera footage is still being uploaded." Ethan shifted slightly where he stood. He hadn't expected the recordings to become part of the hearing so quickly. Judge Harper closed the file. "Before we proceed, I have several questions regarding the sequence of events described in this report." The courtroom grew noticeably quieter. Monica looked toward the bench for the first time that morning and saw something she had almost stopped expecting. The judge wasn't searching for someone to blame. He was searching for facts. Ethan answered the first question confidently. Then came another, and another. The timeline became increasingly difficult to explain. The arrest report stated that Monica had refused repeated lawful commands. Yet the documented timestamps suggested less than 2 minutes had passed between the initial stop and the decision to arrest her. Judge Harper rested his hands on the bench. "Officer Walker," he said calmly, "I believe this court would benefit from seeing the evidence before reaching any conclusions." For the first time since activating his patrol lights that morning, Ethan Walker felt certainty begin to give way to uncertainty. And throughout the courtroom, an unmistakable feeling settled over everyone present. The understanding that before this hearing ended, the evidence itself would decide whose version of the morning deserved to be believed. The truth has a remarkable habit of surviving even the most carefully written report. Judge William Harper allowed a long silence to settle over the courtroom before speaking again. He had spent more than 3 decades on the bench, and experience had taught him that patience often revealed more than pressure ever could. The traffic camera footage appeared on the courtroom monitor. Every eye shifted toward the screen. The recording began with Monica Hayes pulling her vehicle safely onto the shoulder moments after Officer Ethan Walker activated his emergency lights. She rolled down her window before he reached the driver's door. Her hands remained visible on the steering wheel exactly as police training manuals recommended. Judge Harper watched without interruption. The video continued. Ethan requested her license and registration. Monica handed them over immediately. There was no argument, no sudden movement, no raised voice. The timestamp advanced. Ethan instructed her to step out of the vehicle. She complied within seconds. Another timestamp appeared. Less than 90 seconds later, Ethan informed her that she was under arrest. The courtroom remained silent as the recording ended. Judge Harper looked down at the arrest report once more. Then he looked toward Ethan. Officer Walker, your report states that Ms. Hayes repeatedly refused lawful commands before being placed under arrest. Yes, Your Honor. The judge nodded toward the monitor. Please identify where those refusals occurred. Ethan studied the screen as though hoping a different answer might suddenly appear. None did. The traffic camera doesn't record audio, he replied carefully. No, it doesn't, Judge Harper agreed. But it does record behavior. Ethan shifted his weight. Body language can be misleading. Sometimes. The judge folded his hands. Which is precisely why this court requested your body camera footage as well. The courtroom door opened quietly as a court technology specialist approached the clerk's desk carrying a secure digital drive. Your Honor, he said. The body camera recording has finished uploading. Judge Harper gave a slight nod. Please play it. The recording began with Ethan approaching Monica's vehicle. Every word echoed clearly through the courtroom. License and registration. Certainly, officer. Monica's calm voice filled the room. She complied immediately. Moments later, she asked one simple question. May I ask why I'm being asked to step out of my vehicle? Ethan answered, because I said so. She replied, all right. She exited without hesitation.
No refusal.
No resistance.
No confrontation.
The courtroom remained motionless as the final seconds played. Then came the words that changed everything. You're under arrest. May I ask why? Monica asked. You can ask later. The recording ended. Judge Harper removed his glasses and looked directly at Officer Walker. His voice remained measured, but every word carried unmistakable authority. Officer Walker, this recording does not support the narrative presented in your sworn report. A quiet murmur spread through the gallery before the bailiff restored order. Monica sat perfectly still. She showed no satisfaction.
No triumph.
She simply watched as evidence accomplished what emotion never could. For the first time that morning, Ethan Walker realized the courtroom was no longer evaluating Monica Hayes. It was evaluating him. Power becomes dangerous the moment it believes it no longer has to answer to the truth. The silence inside courtroom too lingered long after the body camera recording ended. No one rushed to speak. Even the attorneys seated in the gallery remained motionless, their attention fixed on the bench where Judge William Harper continued studying the evidence before him. He did not raise his voice. He did not display anger. Years on the bench had taught him that calm questions often carried greater weight than emotional accusations. He looked directly at Officer Ethan Walker. Officer Walker, he began. Your sworn report states that Ms. Hayes repeatedly resisted your lawful commands. The video presented to this court shows immediate compliance at every stage of the encounter. Can you explain this discrepancy? Ethan swallowed before answering. Your Honor, I believed her behavior suggested she was preparing to become uncooperative. Judge Harper leaned forward slightly. Belief is not evidence, officer. Did she refuse to provide identification? No, Your Honor. Did she refuse to exit the vehicle?
No.
Did she threaten you?
No.
Did she attempt to flee?
No.
Each answer became quieter than the last. The courtroom seemed to grow heavier with every admission. Judge Harper paused, allowing the significance of those words to settle over everyone present. Then please explain the legal basis for placing Ms. Hayes under arrest less than 2 minutes after initiating the traffic stop. Ethan searched for an explanation that would restore confidence in his actions, but every answer seemed to collapse before it left his mouth. I made a judgment based on the totality of the circumstances. The judge nodded slowly. The totality of the circumstances reflected on this recording shows a citizen who remained respectful throughout the encounter. Monica Hayes sat quietly beside her attorney, her hands folded neatly on the table. She neither celebrated nor reacted. Her composure contrasted sharply with the growing discomfort visible on Ethan's face. Judge Harper turned toward the clerk. Has the court received the statements from the civilian witnesses identified near the traffic stop? Yes, Your Honor. Please summarize them. The clerk opened the file. 3 independent witnesses reported that Ms. Hayes remained calm, complied with every instruction, and repeatedly asked why she was being detained. None observed aggressive or threatening behavior. Another quiet murmur spread through the courtroom before fading once again. Judge Harper closed the file with deliberate care. Officer Walker, a police badge grants significant authority. It also carries an equally significant obligation to exercise that authority with fairness, restraint, and respect for constitutional protections. This court cannot overlook a deprivation of liberty unsupported by credible evidence. Ethan lowered his eyes. For the first time since entering the courthouse, he understood that his report was no longer shielding him. It had become the very document exposing the weakness of his own decisions. Judge Harper looked toward Monica. Ms. Hayes, this court appreciates the dignity with which you have conducted yourself today. She answered softly, Thank you, Your Honor. The judge gave a brief nod before addressing the courtroom once more. We will now determine not only whether this arrest was lawful, but whether the authority entrusted to Officer Walker was exercised in a manner consistent with the principles this court is sworn to protect. At that moment, everyone present realized the hearing had become far larger than a single traffic stop. It had become a test of whether justice would truly hold power accountable. Respect for the law begins when those entrusted to enforce it are willing to be judged by it themselves. Judge William Harper allowed another quiet moment to pass before delivering the words that every person inside the courtroom would remember long after the hearing ended. He closed the arrest report, placed both hands on the bench, and looked directly at Officer Ethan Walker. This court has reviewed the traffic camera footage, the body camera recording, and the statements of 3 independent witnesses. Each piece of evidence tells the same story. They do not support the allegations contained in your sworn report. Ethan stood motionless. His shoulders remained squared, but the confidence that had accompanied him into the courtroom had disappeared. Judge Harper continued, Authority is not a substitute for evidence. A police officer's badge carries extraordinary responsibility, not unlimited discretion. The courtroom remained silent enough that the turning of a single page could be heard from the clerk's desk. Judge Harper addressed the record. The court finds no probable cause supporting the arrest of Ms. Monica Hayes. The charge is dismissed in its entirety, effective immediately. Monica slowly exhaled, though she had never realized she had been holding her breath. Her attorney placed a reassuring hand on the table. Beside her, saying nothing. No words were necessary. The truth had spoken for itself. Judge Harper was not finished. He looked back toward Ethan. Officer Walker, this court is deeply concerned by the inconsistencies between your written report and the objective evidence presented today. A sworn report is not merely paperwork. It is a legal document upon which liberty, reputation, and public confidence depend. Ethan finally spoke. Your Honor, I exercised my judgment in what I believed was a difficult situation. The judge answered calmly. Judgment must be informed by observable facts, not assumptions. Every citizen who appears before this court deserves equal protection under the law, regardless of race, appearance, or circumstance. Several members of the gallery nodded almost imperceptibly. Even the bailiff maintained his focus on the bench, recognizing the importance of the moment unfolding before him. Judge Harper turned toward Monica. Ms. Hayes, the court recognizes that no judicial ruling can erase the embarrassment or inconvenience you experienced today. Nevertheless, The record will reflect that your arrest lacked sufficient legal justification, and all associated charges are dismissed. Monica rose respectfully. Thank you, Your Honor. Her voice remained steady. There was no bitterness in her words, only quiet relief. The judge inclined his head. Your composure throughout these proceedings has reflected great dignity. He then faced Ethan once more. The clerk is directed to forward today's transcript, the admitted recordings, and this court's findings to the police department's Office of Professional Standards for administrative review. That determination will be made independently of these proceedings. Ethan lowered his eyes without responding. For the first time in many years, the weight he felt did not come from the badge resting on his chest, but from the realization that every decision made while wearing it carried consequences. As Monica gathered her belongings and prepared to leave the defense table, she paused for only a moment. She did not glance back at the officer who had arrested her. She had no desire to witness his humiliation. She simply walked toward the courtroom doors with the quiet confidence of someone whose dignity had never truly been taken away, only temporarily questioned. And as those doors slowly opened, everyone inside understood that justice had done far more than dismiss a case. It had reminded an entire courtroom that accountability is the foundation upon which every badge, every bench, and every promise of equality must stand. Real justice does not end when a courtroom empties. It begins with the choices people make after the verdict has been spoken. 2 weeks passed before Officer Ethan Walker was summoned to the Office of Professional Standards. The administrative review had moved quietly, away from television cameras and public attention, exactly as Judge William Harper had intended. Accountability, he believed, should never become a public spectacle. It should remain a disciplined search for the truth. Ethan entered the conference room wearing his full uniform. Across the table sat Deputy Chief Laura Bennett, an internal affairs investigator, and a department legal advisor. A copy of the court transcript rested neatly beside the body camera footage that had already become familiar to everyone in the room. Deputy Chief Bennett spoke first. Officer Walker, this review is not about punishing an honest mistake. It is about determining whether departmental policies governing lawful detention, probable cause, and professional conduct were followed. Ethan nodded quietly. I understand. The investigator pressed play. Once again, the traffic stop unfolded exactly as it had inside the courtroom. Monica Hayes remained calm. She complied with every instruction. She never raised her voice. When the recording ended, no one spoke for several moments. Finally, Deputy Chief Bennett asked, knowing what you know today, would you handle this encounter differently? Ethan looked at the paused image on the monitor. Monica stood beside her vehicle with her hands visible, waiting patiently for instructions. The image no longer reflected a suspect. It reflected a citizen who had trusted the system to treat her fairly. Yes, he answered honestly. I would. Why? The legal advisor asked. Ethan hesitated before speaking. Because I made assumptions before I gathered facts. I convinced myself that I saw resistance when none existed. The admission carried more weight than any excuse could have. Deputy Chief Bennett closed the file. The public grants police officers extraordinary authority because it expects extraordinary restraint. Once assumptions replace evidence, public trust begins to disappear. Ethan lowered his eyes. For the first time in his career, he fully understood that authority alone could never repair broken trust. It had to be earned again, decision by decision. Later that afternoon, Monica returned to the Community Literacy Center, where dozens of children greeted her with excited smiles. None of them knew about the courtroom hearing. None knew about body cameras, legal standards, or administrative reviews. They simply knew that Miss Monica always arrived with books, patience, and encouragement. As she read aloud from a story about courage, she smiled gently. She refused to allow one painful morning to define her life. Her purpose had always been greater than a single injustice. Across town, Ethan removed his badge at the end of his shift and placed it carefully inside his locker. For the first time, he did not see it as a symbol of power. He saw it as a promise that demanded humility every single day. And somewhere beyond the courthouse, beyond the police department, And beyond every official report, the quiet lesson of that morning continued to echo. Justice is strongest not when it protects authority, but when it protects the people authority was created to serve. The measure of justice is not how loudly it condemns wrongdoing, but how faithfully it inspires people to do what is right afterward. Nearly 4 months had passed since the hearing that changed the course of 2 lives. Jefferson County Courthouse continued to welcome hundreds of people each day, each carrying a different burden and a different hope. Most had never heard of Monica Hayes or Officer Ethan Walker. Yet the lessons from that morning quietly remained within the building's walls. The police department had completed its administrative review. Ethan received a lengthy suspension without pay, mandatory constitutional policing and implicit bias training, and a final written warning that would remain permanently in his personnel file. The discipline was significant, but it was not the end of his career. Department leaders believed accountability should create an opportunity for change when genuine remorse was accompanied by meaningful action. Ethan accepted every condition without appeal. He understood that defending his pride would accomplish nothing. Rebuilding trust would require years of consistent conduct rather than a single apology. During his suspension, he volunteered at community forums organized by local civic leaders, where residents spoke openly about their experiences with law enforcement. Ethan did not attend to defend himself. He attended to listen. Story after story revealed the same painful pattern. Ordinary citizens described feeling judged before being heard. Parents spoke about teaching their children how to survive traffic stops instead of simply teaching them how to drive. Every testimony reminded Ethan that authority carried invisible consequences long after an encounter had ended. Across town, Monica continued directing the neighborhood literacy program with the same quiet determination that had defined her long before the courtroom hearing. Her colleagues occasionally asked whether she regretted not pursuing a civil lawsuit. Monica always answered with gentle honesty. "Justice already corrected the record," she would say. "Now I want my energy to build something better." One afternoon, Jefferson County invited Monica to participate in a public discussion about fairness within the justice system. Judge William Harper moderated the event. Community members filled the auditorium, including police officers, attorneys, teachers, and students preparing for careers in public service. Near the back of the room sat Ethan Walker in plain clothes. He listened without drawing attention to himself. During the discussion, a college student asked Monica a simple question. "After everything that happened, how do you keep believing in justice?" Monica smiled thoughtfully before answering. "Because justice isn't a person. It isn't a badge. It isn't even a courtroom. Justice is a choice people make every day when they decide that another human being deserves fairness before judgment." Judge Harper nodded quietly. "And that," he added, "is the principle every institution must protect." Ethan lowered his eyes. Those words echoed the lesson he had learned months earlier inside Courtroom 2. When the event concluded, the audience rose in respectful applause. Monica gathered her notes and walked toward the exit without noticing Ethan standing near the doorway. He simply stepped aside to hold the door open as she passed. She looked at him for a brief moment and offered a polite smile. No speeches were necessary. No dramatic reconciliation was required. Some wounds heal not through extraordinary moments, but through ordinary acts repeated with sincerity. As Monica disappeared into the evening sunlight, Ethan remained at the entrance, quietly understanding that redemption would never arrive all at once. It would be earned one fair decision, one respectful encounter, and one honest choice at a time. Every courtroom eventually falls silent, but the echo of justice belongs to those willing to carry it beyond its walls. A year after the hearing, Jefferson County Courthouse looked exactly as it always had. Lawyers hurried through the corridors with overflowing case files. Families waited anxiously outside courtrooms. Judges moved steadily from one hearing to the next. Time had erased the headlines, but it had not erased the lessons. Monica Hayes continued serving her community with the same quiet determination that had guided her long before the traffic stop changed her life. Her literacy program had expanded into several neighborhoods, helping hundreds of children discover confidence through education. She rarely mentioned the courtroom or the arrest. When people praised her strength, she simply smiled and redirected the conversation toward the future. She believed healing was measured not by how often pain was remembered, but by how faithfully hope was shared. Officer Ethan Walker also continued serving, though his approach to policing had been transformed. Every traffic stop became an opportunity to practice patience. Every conversation began with respect instead of suspicion. Younger officers occasionally noticed the difference and asked what had changed. Ethan never delivered long speeches. He simply answered, "Evidence comes before assumptions." Always. Those 4 words gradually became part of the department's field training discussions. New recruits repeated them without knowing the experience that had inspired them. One afternoon, Judge William Harper attended the graduation ceremony for a class of newly sworn police officers. During his address, he offered a simple reflection. "The law grants authority," he said. "Character determines how that authority is used. Citizens may forget your name, but they will never forget how your decisions made them feel about justice." The room remained silent as every graduate considered the responsibility waiting beyond the ceremony. Ethan listened from the back of the auditorium. Monica happened to be present as a guest speaker representing several community organizations. Their eyes met briefly across the room. They exchanged a respectful nod. Nothing more. Neither needed to revisit the past. The truth had already fulfilled its purpose. After the ceremony ended, families gathered outside beneath a bright afternoon sky. Children laughed as cameras captured proud smiles. Life continued moving forward, just as it always does. Yet somewhere among those ordinary moments lived an extraordinary reminder that institutions earn trust only when ordinary people choose integrity every single day. The traffic stop that began with prejudice had ended with accountability. The courtroom that witnessed conflict had also witnessed fairness. The officer who once relied too heavily on authority had learned humility. The woman who suffered injustice had refused to surrender her dignity. And the judge who calmly followed the evidence had reminded everyone that the law achieves its highest purpose only when it protects every citizen equally. Long after the final transcript had been filed and every headline had faded, one truth continued to resonate far beyond Jefferson County. A badge may represent authority. A courtroom may represent justice. But neither has meaning unless ordinary people possess the courage to choose fairness over prejudice, truth over assumption, and dignity over fear. Because in the end, justice is never defined by the loudest voice in the room. It is defined by the quiet courage to do what is right when no one believes anyone is watching.